Hi, welcome to Blinkity Bloop. I'm Drew D'Amelia.
And I'm Nick Padula.
And this is a podcast where we talk about movies that have come out recently. So if you have a hankering for hearing about all the recent movies that you've been wondering about, well, Nick and I are going to hook you up, and we're going to let you know what you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
However, I just want to put out a disclaimer. We're not necessarily experts at this.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have the best expectations. What you should have great expectations for is Blinkity Bloop.
Yeah, the band, not the podcast.
Yeah, the music group Blinkity Bloop that Nick and I are also a part of, that is where you can expect just top-of-the-line stuff.
Grade A material.
Absolutely exceptional stuff. And with this podcast, you're welcome to expect exceptional stuff, actually, and I guess we'll see what happens with that.
I guess so, yeah.
Anyway, today we are going to go over December movies. That's right, we're talking about movies from December of 2018, right here in 2019. Isn't that charming?
I guess.
I guess they're going to come out approximately close enough to December. I mean, we had to see some December movies. Some of them came out in late December, so whatever. You know what? It's not perfect, but it's just the way it's going to be, all right?
Just gonna have to deal with it.
Just shut your fucking mouth
all right, well,
and listen to this goddamn podcast about
easy.
Movies.
All
Okay,
right.
I'm sorry. I'm
All
sorry.
right.
Anyway, you know what movie I really want to start off with?
What?
Well, gosh, I tell you, it's a movie that rhymes with fighter fan, finto, fighter first.
Jeez, what could that be?
Mary Poppins Returns. No.
Oh,
No, of course, we're talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I think a lot of people are saying it's the best animated movie of the year, and they're right.
yeah.
You
It's
agree?
not that high a bar to hit, I feel like. This year hasn't been the best for animated movies.
But listen, we had a similar conversation at a certain point where you're talking about ranking the animated movies of last year. So I gotta know, how many animated movies did you see in 2018?
All right.
Did you even see Incredibles 2?
I did.
Okay.
So there's that.
But you hadn't during our podcast.
No, I did.
You did? Oh, I just talked that much.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, my bad. So you've seen Incredibles 2.
Yeah. And Into the Spider-Verse. There must have been something else.
Did you see Next Gen?
No.
Did you see Hotel Transylvania 3?
No.
Did you see Smallfoot?
No.
Did you see The Grinch?
No.
Did you see Ralph Breaks the Internet?
No.
Sounds like you missed almost all the movies.
Yep.
Just kidding, you saw Isle of Dogs.
Oh, yeah. I forgot it.
Teen Titans Go to the Movies.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for reminding me about the movies I didn't know I saw.
So, even with Isle of Dogs and Teen Titans Go to the Movies,
Yeah, I'd say this still stands above it, because Isle of Dogs, it was just Wes Anderson revisiting his same stop-motion formula, and while it was charming,
all right. You know, I agree, and I've seen more animated movies than you have, but I do think this is the best.
yeah.
That said, do I think that it's a great movie? Because it's one thing to be the best animated movie of the year, but maybe the competition's not too great, and, you know, I think there have been better years for animated movies. Is this all that it's being hyped up to be? I would say that it is, honestly. I mean, I don't think this movie is necessarily mind-blowing. I don't think that's what makes it excellent. It's just an excellent movie. I think what a lot of people are talking about is the animation style being especially unique, and it is, honestly. It's got a very comic book feel to it. It's still technically computer animated for the most part, except the way that it's lit, it kind of has more of a comic book feel, and definitely they cut out some of the frames and the motion, and it feels a little jarring, and it definitely takes some time to get used to it, but it has this interesting effect because technically there's not really such a thing as comic book animation because comic books are not inherently an animated form.
They're a still medium, yeah.
And yet you see it and you feel, yes, comic book animation, finally. But
yeah,
it's not a thing.
It kind of looked like a mix of stop motion and 3D animation. The way there were less frames, stop motion has something similar, kind of.
Yeah. I don't know why it felt like it fit, but it really felt like it fit.
Yeah, it was very different.
And they did other things too. They would embellish it with these sort of comic book flares. The spider senses were represented by these squiggly lines that would come out of the characters' heads.
And they occasionally had thought bubbles in those little, like, rectangular panels that describe what the character's thinking, which I thought was a great touch as a comic book fan.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And one of my favorite things that they would do is sometimes there would be a big explosion or some big thing happening, and they would essentially boil down this very complex image into a very simple state, which is something that comic books are really good at doing, just boiling down an image to its essence. And you would see that in this movie, and you'd think, well, it's going to look worse without as many details, but it just pops even more. And regardless, even if you say it's different, it's unique, and it's really fun. It is a solid animated style.
Yeah.
And the story was also great. I mean, you have a story about a superhero that is meeting a bunch of other versions of himself. And I feel like you gotta have a good superhero to fit this premise, right?
Like, characters like Batman, I feel like it wouldn't be as fun to just meet other kind of grim, menacing dudes like, hello, hello, hello.
That's true. You wouldn't... Batman is not a character you necessarily want variety in.
Yeah.
I guess it could work with Superman, but it's not something you'd want to see with the lesser superheroes. Like, I don't know about Ant-Man or... I haven't...
Captain America.
Well, I don't know. It just feels like it fits with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I guess Spider-Man's a particularly colorful superhero.
Absolutely.
It's so weird. Why does it feel like Spider-Man can have alternate forms and you feel satisfied about it? But then when I think of Captain America having alternate forms, I'm like, I don't know about that.
Because I feel like Spider-Man's personality is more flexible and he's more, like, fun, while characters like Captain America are grounded, and it's hard to imagine them being anything besides who you see them as.
That's true. I guess there could be alternate Iron Mans, and it would be fun. You have to have a fun initial character.
Yeah.
Because you don't want that character to be so like if it was Captain America and then there were other versions of Captain America, I feel like it'd be very easy to like the other versions a lot more.
Yeah, like, wow, interesting.
That one's a clown.
Captain Mexico.
Oh, well, that could be very interesting.
Yeah.
Just captains of a bunch of different countries.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're going to do this premise, it works with Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man, I would probably give the edge over Iron Man. I feel like Spider-Man is just the superhero for this story. And it works. And we get a lot of different Spider-Men. Not too many. Part of me almost wanted there to be more. They didn't necessarily have to have a bunch of screen time, but I would have been happy to just catch glimpses of them.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I know in the comics there is also a multiverse in the Spider-Man comics. Like, one of my favorite alternate Spider-Man is Spider-Punk or Anarchist Spider-Man, and it's Spider-Man with a mohawk, and he's in a punk rock band, and he fights cops. So he's very punk rock.
He does sound pretty chill.
Yeah.
But we got some good Spider-Man variations in this. I mean, not as creative as you'd think. I mean, you had Miles Morales, who... he just kind of felt like Spider-Man. I guess he was a little bit different from regular Peter Parker. I mean, well, they did have regular Spider-Man in this movie. And that's actually something that bothered me, is they wound up killing him off pretty early in the movie.
Yeah.
And you might be thinking, well, Drew, you have like 7 other Spider-Men that you get to spend time with. Come on. But I'm like, I know, but I feel like I didn't get to spend a lot of time with that version of Peter Parker. Yes, I know the other versions played by Tom Holland or Tobey Maguire or whatever, but not in the Spider-Man animated movie. Like, this is, for all intents and purposes, a totally different universe.
Right.
It is more or less the same that you would get in the other Spider-Man movies, but it just has a different style, a different feel, a different humor to it. And so this Spider-Man is just different. That's just the way it turns out. So I wanted to see more of the main Spider-Man, I guess you could call him, and now he's dead.
Yeah.
And he was really cool when we got to see him.
He had his shit together, and you do get to see the other alternate version of him, like a barely different version, like same personality basically, but if his life kind of went to shit.
Yeah.
Like, you never see a superhero go through divorce proceedings and then, like, kind of give up on life. I guess in The Incredibles, you do see Mr. Incredible kind of let himself go.
I don't remember them getting divorced.
No. What I'm saying is you see a superhero kind of fall out of grace and, like, give up on being athletic or whatever. But this took it to another level, I feel like.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I guess the point I'm ultimately getting at is that I'd say with 3 out of the 6 main Spider-Men that you spent time with, they didn't really feel that different. But then when you had one Spider-Man that's noir Spider-Man, that was very different.
Yeah.
You had one that was literally a girl and a robot powered by a spider. That was a confusing gimmick to pin down.
It was like a mech robot piloted by a mecha spider. I don't know, but it had like an intentionally very anime vibe to it.
And then you had Spider Ham.
Yeah. Which is like a Looney Tunes version of Spider-Man.
Yeah. And I haven't heard anybody talking about, hey, it's like the Simpsons movie. Spider-Pig was the big thing about the Simpsons movie, and now they finally have what is essentially Spider-Pig on the big screen, and where are people going, ha ha ha, it's like the Simpsons movie. It's like people just totally forgot about the Simpsons movie or something.
Then what are you talking about? It's revered by everyone worldwide.
I mean, I like it.
It was pretty good.
I still remember Spider-Pig. I didn't like Spider-Pig very much, but
they milked that for all it was worth.
I think
the trailers did anyway.
Yeah, and people made more of a big deal out of it than it really was in the movie. But
yeah,
whatever. It doesn't matter. I liked John Mulaney very much. I almost wanted to see more of Spider-Ham, but you got a fine dose of him, I feel.
Yeah, I'd say so. Part of me's hoping, though, I don't know, for a sequel maybe, and we could see these characters return in different ways, but maybe that's too much to ask. Maybe this should be standalone. What do you think? I
would really like to see a sequel to this, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it won't have the same punch that this did, because this is a first in a lot of ways. It's the first time I think mainstream audiences have really seen the style. I think you pointed this out to me earlier. This is the first real animated Marvel movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there are a lot of direct-to-video sort of animated movies, but this is the first one that, boom, it's in theaters, it's canon, it's mainstream, so that's cool. And also, it's just the first time we get to see this Spider-Verse stuff, that we're seeing all these different versions of a superhero. It's really cool. So you're going to lose that punch when you do it again, but at the same time, I do feel like there's a lot of potential. I mean, you have an unlimited amount of universes here. That's actually one thing I wanted to see in this movie more, is that ultimately what the plot boiled down to is you had these Spider-Men that accidentally came together because of portal malfunctions, basically. And I thought it would have been interesting to jump into a bunch of different worlds and universes and spend some time there. And you really didn't. Basically, at the end, they all just kind of went back home, and it was pretty simple.
Right.
So I was a little bummed that we didn't get to see more, but honestly, I would call it a nitpick because the movie was so satisfying the way that it was that I didn't feel like I needed more by the end of it. I felt that I wanted more, but I didn't need more. I had what I needed.
Yeah, there was plenty to enjoy.
How'd you feel about Nicolas Cage?
Nicolas Cage was, of course, delightful as noir Spider-Man, and he delivered some hilariously over-the-top lines. Like, he said something about how, like, something about rain. I don't remember.
Listen, all his lines were extremely memorable, and yet, like, I don't think your brain wants to quote them.
It would be doing him an injustice.
That's because what made them funny is they are not things that you would say at all. He was talking in such a cryptic, dark way, so it just wouldn't make sense for us to remember them that well.
No, it wouldn't.
But they were very funny, we promise.
Yeah, the movie itself as a whole was a lot funnier than I expected, and it makes sense coming from the people who wrote the Lego movie, because That had me laughing a lot more than I expected, and this had me laughing more than I expected, which is interesting because I think you said at one point we originally didn't think the Lego movie was going to be any good. It ended up being amazing.
Well, by we, I hope you're not referring to me, because I rooted for it earlier than other people did.
I was skeptical.
The trailer made it look dumb, but when I found out that it was Phil Lord and Chris Miller, I think that's their names.
Yeah.
When I found out they were doing it, I had really liked 21 Jump Street and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, so I'm like, okay, I'm on board. And everyone thought it was just going to be this shitty cash grab, and I don't blame them at all that it wound up being the best animated movie of that year. Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah, same pattern.
They definitely have a habit of just doing something really creative. Though I think with this project, people did not think it was going to be a bunch of bullshit. I think people are excited about this from the get-go, though I will say I think people are nervous because this was by Sony.
Yeah.
And they've had some movies that I've liked. The Hotel Transylvania movies I think are pretty solid, but they also make things like the Emoji Movie. So the Sony is definitely liable to fuck things up. I know this is technically also a Marvel project, so you got Marvel people working on this, but...
Same thing with Venom, though.
Yeah, Sony is not exactly a seal of approval at all.
No.
So, but that's a different reason to not be excited. I think the idea itself people were excited by. So this is the first time that they took an idea that people are actually on board with instead of taking an idea that everyone thought would be shit and then proving that it was actually a good idea.
Yeah, that's true.
So, cool. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, I thought Doc Ock was fine. Fine.
Hmm.
I she was a good villain.
Is that so?
Yeah. It was a little weird, though, because for me, my familiarity with Spider-Man is mostly through the movies. And so I really think about the original 3 movies. Like Green Goblin, and then Doc Ock, and then Venom. Those are the main villains.
Mm-hmm.
And, Sandman or whatever. But
yeah.
let's be real. Venom was the villain.
Yeah.
Venom was the villain of Spider-Man 3. So we had Doc Ock there. And then Green Goblin was there for a little bit, but he was giant. And
he was a literal goblin, basically.
Is that a thing in the comics?
In the comics, he is a big, muscular green man, and he was originally Norman Osborn, the head of Oscorp. So that does track.
Okay. I was just surprised by that. And he didn't show up nearly as much as Doc Ock. And I'm thinking, well, isn't Green Goblin supposed to be prioritized? But, I don't really care that much. And there was no Venom, which, listen, I think, especially after the live-action Venom, wouldn't we all be fucking stoked to see a Venom in Spider-Verse?
Yeah.
If they do a sequel, they gotta get Tom Hardy to voice Venom. They gotta, man. Oh, man. Anyway, Kingpin was a little uncanny valley at first, wasn't he?
In the comics, he's this massive, fat guy. And he's massive in this, but he's massive in a weirder way, because his head is kind of in the middle of his torso. And that's not how bodies work. And most of the people in this are pretty humanoid looking.
Yeah. I think the thing is, when you first see him, you don't really have much of this world that you've seen outside of just regular looking people. So you see him and you're like, wait, what? Is that a human? What is going on here? But I can't remember. Do you see the Green Goblin first or do you see him first?
I think you see Green Goblin first.
Okay, so maybe there's a little transition into seeing a character like him. And eventually, of course, you have Spider-Ham and the robot. Yeah. So, you get prepared and you get used to everything. But yeah, I'd be down for a sequel to this. I think everyone else would be too. Who is your favorite Spider-Man character?
I'd say Noir Spider-Man. Either that or Miles, because Miles, while he was an everyman, kind of brought a more unique spin on Spider-Man than I've seen in previous adaptations. I thought he was more interesting than Tobey Maguire's, definitely more interesting than Andrew Garfield's. It was a Spider-Man we hadn't seen before, and it was refreshing.
Yeah, it definitely felt like a regular Spider-Man. Miles didn't feel different from Peter Parker, but it was different. There was variation there for sure. Spider-Ham is probably my favorite Spider-Man,
Understandable.
but I also really liked Peter B. Parker, or the divorce Spider-Man, we can call him.
Yeah.
I really liked that voice actor. I cannot remember his name, but the way he delivered his lines were so funny. And this is just a really funny movie, too. There are some great jokes, great action, too, in equal parts, both of them.
Oh, I just remembered. The guy who played Peter B. Parker was in Tag.
Right, yeah, it's that
He was
guy.
the bearded
Yeah.
guy, yeah.
He's cool. Mm-hmm. But one thing I gotta say for this movie, it also had emotion, too.
Yeah.
Like some really powerful moments.
Absolutely.
And the thing with the uncle was pretty devastating.
Yeah, on multiple levels.
And it was a good twist. Mm-hmm. Because basically, you know, the classic twist of the uncle getting shot and dying, and Peter Parker's like, "Oh, geez, not again."
Oh, geez, guess I gotta be a vigilante now.
But in this one, the uncle wound up being a bad guy, and then was trying to kill Miles, but when Miles revealed himself to be Miles, the bad guy was conflicted and then got shot because of it by Kingpin.
Yeah.
And that's just such a great variation of that classic uncle story that everyone would go, "We don't want to see that anymore. We get it. It's so boring." This is a wonderful twist on that.
Mixed it up.
And I love the central theme of being yourself. And that sounds like such a dumb theme. But how they made it interesting is that Miles was not being able to live up to his full potential as Spider-Man. He was kind of failing where the other Spider-Man had figured it out. And he couldn't figure out why. And basically people are just telling him, you just gotta feel it. It's not about knowing technique or knowing what other people are doing. You just have to take a leap of faith. And essentially what they were getting at is, don't try to be another Spider-Man. Be your own Spider-Man. And then when he was able to embrace that, he started really kicking ass.
Yeah.
And he really became an awesome character.
And he got his own powers completely separate from all the other ones.
And I feel like that's just such an uplifting, emotional message. But at the same time, it also really fits the gimmick that they have going on. Because it's essentially saying that anyone can be Spider-Man. And in this movie, they are literally proving that.
Yeah.
It'd be one thing if they had that theme, but it was just one Spider-Man. And it was just other people telling him, you just gotta be yourself and take a leap of faith. But just by showing that all these different people can be Spider-Man, they're literally saying, don't be afraid to be yourself, because any kind of person can be a Spider-Man. That's just cool to me. Mm-hmm. But you know what else is cool to me?
What?
Bird Box.
Bird Box.
I've heard a lot of people talking about Bird Box.
Yeah,
it's apparently
I have too.
It's a famous old Netflix movie. Mm-hmm. I have not seen it.
I have.
Okay, so tell me, Bird Box. What is Bird Box?
Well, let's play a game. When you hear the title, what would you assume it's about?
A bird is in a box. I'm not being very creative, but that's just what I think.
All right, fine. Well, I suppose that's true to an extent. There is a bird in a box at one point. I won't explain why yet. To keep it simple, you know the movie The Happening by M. Night Shyamalan?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that premise where it's basically the end of the world because everyone's killing themselves because there's some weird thing in the air that makes you want to commit suicide. This is kind of like that, but a bit smarter. It's kind of hard to explain what is making the people kill themselves. They don't really explain it. They give all these weird mythological things, but they're never like, okay, so there's a big invisible spooky thing in the air, and when people see it, they see their worst fears manifested or their worst regrets, and it's so awful for them, it makes them want to blow their brains out. So that's what happens, and Sandra Bullock is just thrown into it and goes through all these post-apocalyptic tropes. She gets together with this small band of survivors whose personalities clash, and they get picked off one by one for stupid reasons, and they venture outside and meet like crazy people, and it seems original at times, and there are unique things going on. Like, in order to get around in the outside world and be in the open air, you have to wear blindfolds.
Why?
Because if you open your eyes and whatever's in the air gets into your eyeballs, it makes you go crazy and kill yourself.
But you can open your mouth real wide and they won't go in your mouth?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. They don't explain what the thing is, so you don't know if it's like a toxin. I assume it's not a toxin, because if it is, you could, like, sniff it in or breathe it in.
It sounds like an eye monster.
Yeah, it targets their eyes specifically. It doesn't go after your ears. Actually, no, that's not even true, because at one point, one character hears someone they care about who isn't really there, and they're like, just take the blindfold off, just take it off. And I'm just like, wait a minute, that's cheating, thing in the air. You're supposed to only go after their eyes, you fucking asshole. What are you, next, are you gonna smell like a cinnamon roll or something? Like, oh, cinnamon, and they take the blindfold off and kill themselves.
Well, listen, they can only go in through the eyes, but no rules are saying that they can't trick them into making it so they can go through the eyes.
I guess that's true.
So they're using other senses in order to trick them. And I like that. Like, you want this cinnamon roll? Oh, yeah. You got to look at it. Oh, man, I do want to look at it. Cinnamon rolls look very quaint.
They pull their blindfold up. Oop, gotcha. Also, one thing I want to talk about, the deaths in this movie are really funny, and they're definitely not supposed to be.
Oh, no.
A lot of people took this movie very seriously, but it was very difficult for me when there's such absurd deaths as a lady just casually taking one step back into a road and immediately, like, within a snap, getting hit by a truck. And, like, her ragdoll body just, like, just gets squished against the car. And you can tell when people are about to kill themselves because their eyes change color.
Oh.
It's kind of
Is
interesting.
it purple?
No.
Is it red?
No, it's like this weird garbagey color.
Oh.
It's like a weird mix of, like, ugly colors.
Okay, fair enough.
They wanted to try and figure out what the thing in the air was, so they had a guy look at security cameras, and in case the thing messed with his head, they strapped him down. So the thing exposed itself to him, and you'd think, oh, he's trapped in a chair, he's fine, but he wobbled it in such a way where when he fell over, he cracked his head against like a stone table and then died.
Whoops.
Whoa. And there's this, I think the best moment though was this new mother who just had her child, and this crazy guy who saw the thing, but it didn't make him kill himself. It just made him crazier. He pulled the blinds on the building they were inside of up, so she was exposed to the thing outside. And she was about to jump out the window while holding her infant. And Sandra Bullock said, like, just let me see the baby for a second. Let me see the baby. Before she kills herself with her baby. And then she manages to get the baby away. And the lady just does a running jump through the window. So, and there was this picture someone posted showing Ralph Wiggum from The Simpsons being thrown through a window, and it looked just like that. And I couldn't stop laughing. And it definitely wasn't supposed to be a funny moment because she just had a kid and then she killed herself.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those tricky things. It reminds me of Hereditary, where something happens, and technically you're thinking, I see how that's scary because it's unsettling. But it also plays in the same way comedy does. A lot of times, the reason something is funny is because it's not like the normal thing.
Yeah.
So there is a very fine line between funny and horrifying.
I guess so.
And listen, this is the kind of premise that I feel like there's a lot of potential for. I mean, yeah, The Happening was hilariously stupid, but I liked the idea of something that made people want to kill themselves. And I like how in Bird Box, there's an emotional reason they want to kill themselves. It's not just they're doing it because, oh, time to put a chainsaw in my brain.
Yeah.
They're doing it because they see their worst fears. and they hate their fears, is what I'm getting.
More or less, yeah.
Okay. So that's great. Basically, it's making them extremely depressed to the point where, like, I don't want to live anymore. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
And yet, I just feel like there's got to be a way to do that. There's got to be a way where people are just constantly so depressed that they want to kill themselves. Maybe the deaths don't have to be ridiculous. Maybe if the deaths just weren't ridiculous, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
If they were more emotionally charged, like if this woman, when she jumped out the window, if she was doing it while just crying, or like if she was doing it to try to get away from some fear that she was perceiving or something like that, then it might be a lot less goofy.
Right.
I have a feeling that despite the fact they had the setup that, no, these are emotionally charged suicides, they didn't really show the emotion that much during the suicides.
Yeah. Yeah, so it didn't really connect. There were two pretty cool moments in it. And one was, as I described earlier, there's certain members of society that are already kind of loony, and when they're exposed to this thing in the outside world, instead of making them kill themselves, it just makes them kind of just evil, more or less. Like, they see it, and instead of turning that weird garbage color, their eyes turn a weird greenish garbage color.
Oh.
So it's a slight variation. So then there's like a gang of these people who can walk around seeing while everyone else has to have their eyes closed. So these are like, when our hero gang is out and about in the world, these bad guys who can see confront them. So you have the blind versus the sighted.
That's really tense because they have such an advantage being able to see.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that a lot, actually.
And one guy, like, was messing with a guy with a gun. The guy with the gun couldn't see, but he had a shotgun, so it could, still hit a dude, theoretically. But the guy was jumping around. He was like, hey, I'm over here. Now I'm over here. And it was really, it was a little hard to take it seriously, but it was still tense.
And that's the thing. I feel like that's the line, is that could be funny, but ultimately the situation had enough going on where it felt tense.
Yeah.
Because you felt this power dynamic. So you were able to more feel the tension than how ridiculous it was. So maybe if a woman is getting hit by a truck, if you feel a little bit more of that tension, it's not as funny.
Right.
But when it just kind of happens, then it becomes funny. Mm-hmm. And that might have been the inherent problem with The Happening, too.
Kinda.
And The Happening didn't even have that emotional subtext.
No, it didn't. And the other cool moment, Sandra Bullock's character is trying to escort these two kids to this safe haven where people can go. And so they have to go down this really long river, still blindfolded, having to navigate rapids and stuff. And so, like, she has to have one of the kids basically sacrifice themselves by taking their blindfold off to see where they're going. And, like, the kids are trying to figure out who to pick to basically die. So it got really, like, emotional.
Yeah, that is...
And hardcore, like, kids killing themselves. Like, it didn't end up going in that crazy a direction. They both ended up living, which I thought was a bit of a ripoff. But the tension was still there.
Yeah, the movie sounds all right.
It was all right.
Just... They gotta, if they just fixed that ridiculous death thing, I feel like they might have had something there.
I think they might have. And if they use less, like, disaster movie apocalypse tropes, because that also bogged it down a lot for me.
Just things felt cliche sometimes.
Very cliche, with just trying to survive, getting supplies, getting picked off one by one. They mixed it up in some ways, but they fell victim to a lot of their own genre issues.
Yeah, I think the thing is, when there are cliches, I don't think the cliches are the problem. I think it's that there aren't enough fresh things to go with it.
Right.
So that's what it sounds like the problem was, that they had some interesting ideas, but not enough of them.
Right. Oh, one more thing. I never explained why it was called Bird Box.
Yeah, and that's a huge cliche. Having a bird in a box in your movie. Yeah. I'm tired of seeing that.
So overused. So, anyway, the reason it's called Bird Box is because they kept a bird either in a cage or in a box because when the air thing, which there's still no name for it, so I'll just call it the air thing, was nearby, they were extra loud, like they chirped more, which I didn't really get because I just assumed it was always in the air and just covered the whole earth. But apparently there are times when it wasn't around, so could they theoretically have taken their blindfolds off? They never explored that.
You know what you just reminded me of, though?
What?
Because I was a little bothered that the birds could be in a cage instead of a box.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, hey, it's called Bird Box, not Bird Box and Bird Cage. Then I thought, oh yeah, this is that movie called The Bird Cage.
With Robin Williams and Nathan Lane as a gay couple. Very different movie.
And yet they seem so similar, don't they?
It's true. They both involve birds.
Well, all right. You know what other movie I think is also pretty similar to Bird Box and The Bird Cage?
What?
The American Meme.
Oh?
Yes, The American Meme.
What's that have to do with those two films?
I don't know, okay? I'm sorry.
All right. Well,
Let me give you some context, though.
Okay.
I was talking to my uncle recently, and basically I was talking to him about how I was a little annoyed and dispirited about the fact that it seems like if you want to really make it in the entertainment industry, like the music industry,
Yeah.
you really got to be in certain locations, like LA or New York City or, Memphis, just music places.
Right.
And it bothers me because I want it to be something that you could do from anywhere. And the idea that you have to just pack up and move, I don't like that. It kind of gives me some anxiety.
Me too.
And so my uncle recommended this movie, The American Meme, as a response to me sharing this anxiety.
With a title like that, I really don't see how that would help you.
What I assumed he was recommending it for was that it would feature various people that were responsible for memes over the recent history of the internet. Maybe the Numa Numa guy as a broad example. And it would show how they received acclaim, but they weren't necessarily in LA or Memphis or New York City or Nashville. And so that seemed appealing enough.
Right.
Then again, I'm thinking, well, for the most part, people that are meme stars like Numa Numa guy or Chocolate Rain guy, they don't really wind up getting big careers out of it. So I'm not
really.
Yeah, that's showing. You see, you can be famous from anywhere, but only for a little bit. Well, that's not the most inspiring, but okay.
Yeah.
So I went to this movie, and I don't know why my uncle recommended it, because basically it has absolutely nothing to do with the anxiety that I was addressing.
Okay.
I can't even fathom how it has... Basically, okay, here's what I can say, is that it features famous people, but it shows how they're ultimately kind of sad.
Oh.
I mean, they have money, and they have fame, but it's not perfect. And sometimes they have some pretty sad moments in this documentary. You have roughly 5 social media influencers featured in this. Some of them you've definitely heard of, like Paris Hilton and who's that fat bearded guy? It's DJ Khaled.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, them. And then you have other people that I haven't heard of, but they are technically celebrities, like 20 million Vine followers or fucking whatever they're called.
Right.
And it's easy to think that, because they're stars, they could be faking their sadness in this documentary, but it definitely seems pretty fucking real.
I'd believe it.
And the reasons they're sad seem pretty fucking believable too, so... My best guess as to what the purpose of this recommendation was almost to say, well, don't worry, because you'd be sad even if you were famous. Which I don't think is what my uncle was getting at.
No.
But I suppose... because all these people were living in big cities. They didn't come from a unique place from what it seemed like. But maybe what he was getting at is that things could be done from the internet, which is technically, I mean, that is a unique place.
Right.
You don't have to physically be somewhere, and yet all these people were still physically in these main areas for the entertainment industry. So, I don't know. I thought that I would not like this movie because at first, you're just seeing the lives of these people that are very famous. And I'm not someone that's super into celebrity culture.
No.
I'm someone that can easily get envious of celebrity culture. And yet, I found myself fascinated. I think if it was just movie stars, I wouldn't care as much, though, honestly, I might even be fascinated. I hate to admit it, but I just think there is something fascinating about seeing the lives of the rich and famous.
Yeah, especially the downsides of them. Like, you always see the glitz and glamour of the famous, and you see their happy side, but you never see the, like, shitty moments where they're like, oh, my, like, Fabergé egg broke.
Yeah. And, well, in all seriousness, I feel like it's so weird to want to see these people sad, and it's weird that I'm calling that the best part of the movie. But I think it makes them more relatable, because I think that when you're not that famous, you can be going through your existence and you're thinking, man, my life is so sad compared to their life. There is a happier standard for life out there. Why can't I have it?
Yeah.
And then when you get evidence that, no, everyone goes through this, even these people that you think are totally happy, it helps you become more comfortable with your situation.
Definitely, yeah.
So it is helpful. But it's just fascinating to see their lives, especially because it was focusing on social media influencers specifically. To me, that's still pretty new. It's not something I'm too used to. And so seeing it spelt out in a documentary, it was a lot more engaging than I assumed it would be. It really was. And it's not like I particularly liked any of the people that this documentary was following, but I'm glad I got to see snippets of their lives, I guess. Honestly, though, I think the title was a little misleading.
I'm disappointed it had nothing to do with actual memes.
Yeah, because I thought it would be your more traditional meme, and these are influencers, so supposedly they have made a meme here or there, but I don't want to see the influencers, I want to see the memes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to see some weird, like, awkward kid, like, designing like a cat meme or like a Minions meme or like I was hoping for the inception of like certain of those weird picture memes, like Shocked Pikachu or like that weird old guy who says, "Guess I'll die now."
Yeah, I would be down for a whole show. Just every season, each episode talks about a different meme and gives its history for 20 minutes.
I'm sure we'll get that on the History Channel eventually.
More or less, oh boy. More or less you have that on the internet. You can just look it up.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if it was just called the American Influencers or something like that, I get why they went with meme. It's more of a buzzword, but
it's deceptive.
It is really deceptive.
Yeah.
But, maybe the makers didn't know the difference. That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Oh, well. But I think this title of this next movie I'm going to talk about is probably a little more relevant.
Okay.
Dumplin.
Dumplin?
Dumplin was not about a dumpling.
What the fuck? All this lying.
More misleading.
God damn it.
It was about a girl who had the nickname Dumplin.
Okay, well, I guess that's a step in the right direction.
It was allegedly because she was pudgy.
Oh.
She was a big girl.
Okay.
And I think Dumplin was only meant to be an endearing term. You're like, yeah, that's you're my Dumplin. But ultimately, this was the story about this heavy girl who didn't like herself because she was heavy. And I think that this was a compelling arc for her to go through. Essentially, she had to try to learn how to like herself. It would be one thing if the movie was a story about this heavy girl and she wasn't able to attract the guy that she thought was really hot. And it's because the guy that was really hot didn't like her body. And she just had to learn, what you think doesn't matter, you hot guy. But the twist was a lot more interesting in this. Is that the guy that she thought was really hot actually did like her back and then wanted to get with her. But she was too anxious about the situation because she didn't feel like she deserved to be with him because she felt he needs to be with a hot girl. he shouldn't be with me because I'm fat, so therefore I'm not hot. And there's a great line where this hot guy just told her in the middle of her just having a bit of a breakdown about this, I think that you're beautiful, but what I think doesn't matter, does it? So what the movie's saying is it's not a movie about screw what other people think, you're beautiful. It's like, it doesn't matter what other people think. It matters what you think specifically. Yeah. You have to be able to like yourself. And she does ultimately learn to like herself at the end. I feel like it was a little sloppy, her transition from hating herself to loving herself. It could have been patched up a little bit, but there are definitely the pieces there for a progression into that transition, so
right.
It was fine, but it's just nice to see a body positivity movie done with some thought.
Definitely.
And one of my favorite parts is technically this revolves around a beauty pageant, and a heavier girl winds up getting second place. And it's a lot like the ending to Rocky, where basically it doesn't matter who won the match. It just matters that Rocky went the distance. The fact that a heavier girl placed at all is what mattered, because then the main character just left the pageant right as they were about to announce the winner. And you hear in the background that the winner was this conventionally attractive person, that of course that's going to be the person that wins, but by having it in the background shows that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What matters is that a heavy person was able to be called beautiful in this pageant. It was very affirming for our main character. It was kind of like the final piece she needed to really feel like she was attractive for the way she looked.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great. This was also a movie that had a lot of Dolly Parton music.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why.
Was Dolly Parton in it, like acting in it?
No.
Oh.
And I thought it would be a musical where they sang Dolly Parton songs. And so the fact that it was about body positivity didn't really matter. Because basically they have musicals like that where they will take a bunch of songs from an artist and they'll just find a story to tell by piecing all the songs together.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like with the Mamma Mia musical, nothing about ABBA's music necessarily makes you think about a girl and she doesn't know which of these three guys is her dad.
Right.
But you're willing to go, yeah, okay, that's fine because the ABBA music is in it, so sure. Yeah. I thought it might be something similar to that, but this isn't a musical. It just features Dolly Parton.
Huh.
There are characters in this movie that are very much into Dolly Parton, and they keep quoting things that Dolly Parton has said, and they'll sing her songs sometimes. And honestly, you get a lot of variety of Dolly Parton music featured in this, but you don't get to hear the songs for very long, and it's almost a little frustrating. I don't listen to a lot of Dolly Parton, but I found myself going, no, just longer, come on.
Commit.
Yeah. So it was a little odd, I guess, because it felt like a body positivity movie / a Dolly Parton appreciation movie.
Huh.
And it doesn't seem like those would go together, but you know what? It worked. It doesn't feel like, wow, that was a great fit. But at the same time, it's not like they didn't go together at all. It was fine. Like eggs and mayonnaise. It's something that's apparently a thing, even though it doesn't feel like it should be.
Mayonnaise is already made of eggs.
Oh, you're what?
Yeah, that's how you make mayonnaise. There's eggs in them.
I didn't know. I knew so little about mayonnaise.
Well, I taught you something new today.
I was really hoping that would be the result of me seeing Dumplin, is that I would finally know what's in mayonnaise, so thank you.
The mystery is solved thanks to Dumplin.
Well, I sure hope there's another mystery solved with this next movie that I saw.
Is it a mystery?
No, it's Roma.
Oh.
You know Roma, that movie.
That movie.
Everyone's talking about it. It's the guy that did Gravity. It's gonna sweep at the awards or something, get a bunch of nominations or whatever.
Yep.
And listen, it is a really effective story. And what's really interesting about it is that it's also a really simple story. And so you'd think, all right, if it's a simple story, then why is it so memorable? Why are people so drawn to it? But honestly, what was so interesting is these simple things just played out in a very memorable way. Like, ultimately, this was a story about somebody that got pregnant, and then the boy left her, and then she had a miscarriage. That was pretty much it when it comes down to the basic plotting. And you're probably thinking, yeah, I know that story. And yet, there was just something very unique about the way that it was told. Like, when the girl first revealed that she was pregnant, she did it in a movie theater while she was making out with this guy, and the guy seemed pretty happy about it. Then he said he was going to go to the bathroom, and did the girl want anything? She said no. And then the next shot, you just see the girl looking for the guy, and he's gone. There was just something very memorable about the way this very simple story beat was told. And I feel like this whole movie is made up of surprisingly memorable scenes for something that feels like it shouldn't be memorable because it's very basic. And so you just got to give credit to the director for that one. It's not even really the job of the writer. Well, I guess there was writing involved in it too, but the directing was great. And also, one thing that this director does that I really like is he's famous for long takes.
Yeah.
And long takes really immerse you. And I feel like I really felt that in Roma. I mean, I'm sure I felt it in his other movies too, but especially in Roma. I mean, there were 2 scenes where the long takes were just fantastic. One was this, basically, this whole stretch of the movie was probably the best part. But basically, she's in a furniture store, and there's some sort of a riot going on outside that's getting violent, and people are getting shot. And you're seeing the whole thing play out from the perspective of watching it through the windows of the furniture store.
Oh, wow.
And the camera's just slowly panning to see what happens. And at some point, there's a couple that actually bursts into the furniture store trying to escape the violence. And then this guy just gets shot right in the furniture store, and it's done in such a raw way, and nothing in the movie had really been that up close and violent before, that you just feel how horrifying that death is.
Jeez, yeah.
And from what I remember, this is all one unbroken take. And you don't really think about it much, but you just are that much more immersed in what's going on because of that direction. It was really... it's just so surprising to me, because listen, I'm not in love with the movie. I do feel that it was a little boring because I wasn't super into the story. But I have to say I am impressed by how roped into it I managed to be. There's another scene that was very effective with the long take at the end, where basically it's just this one long take of this girl, this main girl, going off to save these 2 children from drowning. And it's also done in a very raw way. I feel like that's another clear theme in this movie, is that things are just done so realistically, so you just really feel like they're happening, and that's captivating as well.
Definitely sounds it.
I didn't even mention that after that furniture scene, basically the water broke for the main girl, and she had to go.
Ooh.
She had to go to the hospital in the middle of this riot, and it was just chaos. And that was something special, I think. Because I think a lot of the moments in this were basic, and yet they were just done in this way where they felt fresh. But this right here just felt like, yeah, okay, that having to give birth under those conditions is just inherently very interesting. Yeah. There's not some sort of a tiny little embellishment to make it stand out. It just stands out naturally. And those, I think, are the 2 best things about Roma.
Okay.
Everything feels very realistic, and the camera shots hold for a while, and it just culminates in an incredibly immersive experience. Yeah, I wish the story was a little bit better, but I more or less look at it as taking what could have been a rather ordinary story and making it a lot more extraordinary than it could have been.
Well, that sounds pretty great.
Yeah, I recommend it. But this next movie, I don't know if I'm going to recommend it. What do you think?
I don't know. You'd have to tell me what it is first.
No, I don't know if I want to recommend this movie unless I really feel like it's going to be people's favorite. Oh, well, hey, this movie's called The Favorite.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow.
Crazy.
Hey.
So The Favorite, yeah.
Ooh. I was very willing to do that for a long time.
I believe you.
No, actually, it didn't occur to me until late. I saw some people's top movies of 2018, and the favorite was number one for a couple of them. I literally didn't put together, it's the favorite. It's your favorite. But I could see it becoming people's favorite movie.
Yeah, it's up there for me.
And who's the director again?
Yorgos Lanthimos, a Greek director.
Yes. And did he make a movie before The Lobster?
Yeah, he made this really weird movie called Dogtooth. It was in Greece, and much in his style, it's very dark, strange, abstract, absurdist story where parents teach their kids the wrong information and basically hold them hostage. So if the kids ever manage to escape, they won't be able to survive in the real world because they think, like a toothbrush is called a bagel, or so they're intentionally taught wrong info. So, and they have incest. So he's always been a very weird director, but that's what I liked about him.
Yeah, I saw The Lobster, and then I saw The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and I really liked both of those movies. And I think it's safe to say that he's got a unique style, which is always impressive to me, because I always feel like we must have run out of styles for directors by now. Yeah. And someone like him will come along and go, I gotcha. There's one more. Mm-hmm. And so there's something beautiful about that.
It's refreshing.
But his style, basically, I think it comes down to, I think it's funny situations that are treated dryly. I think that's what it is, not the other way around.
Yeah.
It's not dry situations that have comedy injected into them. It's comedy that has dryness injected into it.
Yeah, he thrives on absurdism.
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, it's more or less the same effect either way, but I like that a lot. This movie with The Favorite is probably his least bizarre movie.
Yeah, which is still to say it's more bizarre than most period pieces. Like, it's set in Victorian times, and it still stands out from all of those.
Yeah, I mean, this movie still has a scene of a naked guy getting pelted by fruit and being extremely happy about it, and I'm not sure you ever figure out what the purpose of that was.
Yeah, some very inexplicable, strange moments that just happen to fit right in.
But this is also another really simple story where it's just a love triangle, and that is literally it. It is two women that are after the same other woman.
Who happens to be the Queen of England.
Yes, and while that mostly doesn't matter, it does kind of add some intrigue here and there, but it's mostly just a love triangle done in this director's style, and that's what makes it work really well.
Yeah.
Love triangles can be dramatic, but I feel like oftentimes, at least from my perspective, you kind of look at a love triangle and think, all right, this is a little bland. Who cares? And that is more or less what's going on here. It feels like a very petty love triangle that's not terribly important. It's not played up to be dramatic. Similar to this director's style, he definitely makes it seem very dry, but the characters take it so seriously, and that's what makes it funny.
Yeah.
And also the fact that this is a period piece, you just don't often see comedy in period pieces.
No, they're always way too serious and feel like soap operas often.
And I feel like you're very used to period pieces being dry, so it really helps to give this effect of dryness, and yet characters are funny in this.
Yeah.
And not necessarily funny in a traditional way. I mean, sometimes they are. But a lot of the humor just comes out of the fact that this very boring setting is being taken so seriously.
Yeah.
And is so simple, but it really works.
And another comedy thing is the Queen, who is supposed to be this all-powerful figure, frequently has mental breakdowns, and she's in the middle of a war, and advisors are going to her looking to, like, have her lead them in, like, battle tactics and stuff, and she's, like, passing out in front of, like, Parliament and, like, throwing up from eating too much cheese and just doing all these absurd things you'd never imagine a queen would do.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on what it is to be manic depressive, but she seems like what it would be to be manic depressive.
Definitely.
She's not an effective ruler, and she needs the lover that she currently has to basically help her get through being a queen.
Yeah, her initial lover is basically the real power behind the throne that makes all the real decisions.
Yeah, but just her character, it was fascinating because sometimes it'd be outbursts, but sometimes it would just come out of nowhere and you wouldn't even really know why. At one point, there were musicians playing outside, and you see her enjoy it at first, but then she just slowly begins to well up, and then she yells at them to stop. You're thinking, why? What's going on? And that's part of what makes it so enchanting. And the performance was amazing. I mean, all three of these actresses were great, but hers especially. Sometimes you'd look at a performance and think, that has to be so exhausting and miserable to do.
Yeah.
And boy, she deserves a lot of credit for the hell I imagine she went through.
Definitely.
Being as great as she was at that character. But one thing with competition movies that I usually want is for it to be an even match. So you have, what are the two actresses?
Rachel Weisz and Emma Stone.
And okay, quick diversion.
Oh, yeah, I know where you're going.
Because we saw this movie together, and when I first see Emma Stone, I'm telling Nick, wow, Margot Robbie looks a lot like Emma Stone. And you might be thinking, that's a weird comment to make in this movie. But here's the problem. I thought that we were in that other movie that had Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie.
Yeah.
I got them mixed up.
Mary, Queen of Scots, which is a serious period piece.
I wasn't aware there were two period pieces coming out this year, so I just thought they were the same movie. So I was convinced Emma Stone was Margot Robbie.
And I was like, no, that's Emma Stone. And you're like, what are you talking about?
And listen, only under that context do I actually genuinely think they do look a little similar. I feel.
Maybe a bit.
I think there's something there.
I guess.
But essentially, Rachel Weisz was the one that was already with the Queen. And Emma Stone came in as a newcomer and essentially wanted the same perks that Rachel Weisz was getting, because Rachel Weisz essentially had powers since she was the Queen's girl. And I would have liked to see it be even. Ultimately, what wound up happening is Emma Stone triumphed, and Rachel Weisz got really fucked over because she essentially poisoned Rachel Weisz, and then Rachel Weisz, because she was poisoned, wound up getting herself into a pretty bad accident on a horse and wasn't discovered for weeks, I believe.
Yeah.
So Emma Stone wound up winning, and I thought that would be something that was a little frustrating because I tend to like things playing out as evenly as they can. Fair is fair. But I really like the direction it wound up going instead, because basically you could tell by this point in the movie, you had thought earlier that both of these women were compatible with the Queen and they both loved her equally, but you really got a feeling at a certain point Rachel Weisz genuinely really cared about the Queen. She had the opportunity to blackmail the Queen in order to get rid of Emma Stone, but she ultimately didn't do it and burnt the papers that she would have blackmailed the Queen with because she just loved the Queen too much. Where Emma Stone, you gradually realize, is not a character that actually loves the Queen that much. And it's tragic because the Queen winds up choosing Emma Stone over Rachel Weisz and sending Rachel Weisz elsewhere, out of the kingdom. She's revoked from being the Queen's special lady, and now Emma Stone has taken her place. And that feels heartbreaking. But then there's this scene where it all comes together and you realize, wait a minute, this is actually genius. Remember how the Queen is manic depressive, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So she winds up asking Emma Stone to perform sexual favors, which is something that happens very regularly in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And in this last scene where you're just seeing them in the middle of this sexual act, and you can tell that they're unhappy and not into it because the Queen is clearly just out of sorts entirely. And because she doesn't have Rachel Weisz there to kind of keep her on track. She's got Emma Stone instead, who's not qualified for this job of
No.
dealing with her mental health.
No.
Both of them are just miserable. And it's amazing because you thought Emma Stone won, and Emma Stone thought she won. But ultimately, she actually got a really shitty situation. And Rachel Weisz, she kind of lost because she wound up not being able to keep the love that she had.
Or the power.
Yeah, but at the same time, she got away from it. She was sent away from the queen, and clearly the queen is just so fucked up at this point, it almost seems like there's no repairing it.
No, yeah.
And so it's like Emma Stone essentially trapped herself in this situation, and Rachel Weisz was able to get out.
There's some poetic justice.
I thought it was fantastic writing for that ending, and the whole thing was just really solid.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I liked is that the fact that this was a lesbian thing going on didn't matter, didn't come up at all.
No.
The most that happened is it was kept a secret, because I feel like if people knew about it at the time, there'd be some buzz.
Maybe a bit.
But the movie did not emphasize, oh, you better keep this a secret. It basically just said, all right, yeah, so it's going to be kept a secret for obvious reasons, whatever. Just don't focus on that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's what was great about it. They were lesbians, and there was no attention at all drawn to the fact that they had that sexual orientation.
Yep.
It's just the way it was.
It's the way it should be.
And, part of me is almost not sure that Emma Stone was even actually a lesbian. Because just with Rachel Weisz, you understand that she actually loved the queen.
Yeah.
But with Emma Stone, it's very possible because she just wanted power. She was just pretending to be a lesbian.
Yeah, I mean, she was a big social climber. She spent a good amount of the movie teasing this one soldier dude so she could marry him and then climb even higher in the ranks of society. So
Yeah.
it's hard to tell with her what her, real feelings were.
I guess it ultimately doesn't matter.
No, not really.
At least we know there are two true lesbians.
Yeah, that's something.
I liked the movie a lot, though.
Me too.
I almost liked it as much as Mary Poppins Returns.
Whoa, you like this better?
No.
Oh.
Okay, so have you seen Mary Poppins?
Yes, I saw the original a while ago when I was a youngin'.
Okay, I think Mary Poppins, the original movie, is pretty good. It's mostly just fun, disconnected romps, honestly. It sort of feels like an anthology. I mean, Mary Poppins takes the kids into an animated world. Woohoo! Then Mary Poppins takes the kids to see a laughing floating uncle. Hooray! Then Mary Poppins takes the kids to see a bunch of fun dancing chimney sweeps. Hurrah! And none of those actually really advance the plot very much. Maybe a little tiny bit, but basically not at all. What the actual plot is there's a strict dad who's essentially repressing these kids' imagination and their ability to be creative. And that's why he hires Mary Poppins, the nanny, who seems very qualified for the job, but she's actually teaching them about fun and stuff.
Uh-oh.
But ultimately, it's not really about the children learning how to have fun, because they know how to have fun. The father is trying to get them to behave and be more repressed, essentially, but the children get it. And Mary Poppins is like, let's go on a fun adventure. And they're like, we know what to do. Have fun. It's really a story about how the dad has to learn how to have fun himself.
Yeah.
Because when the dad learns how to have fun, then the children don't have to hide, and they're able to just also be fun. And the whole family feels a lot happier and a lot more connected. And at that point, Mary Poppins has essentially done her job, and she goes off. So it feels like the dad's story.
Yeah.
And I don't know, since Mary Poppins is spending most of her time with these children, it feels like it should be the children's story. And since it is the dad's story, you want there to be some build-up to it. There's a little bit of build-up, but his arc mostly kind of comes out of nowhere. So it's a little sloppy, but it was fun. It was a fun movie. It was definitely memorable. One thing I was hoping, if they were going to make a sequel, 50 plus years later, is that they might be able to improve upon those things that I thought were broken. Maybe it'd feel a little less like an anthology and more like a cohesive whole. I thought that could be really cool. Not only did they not improve upon that, they basically made the same movie. Which is even worse.
Bummer.
Because another thing I didn't realize I wanted from Mary Poppins Returns is for there to be new adventures that these people go on.
Right.
I kind of had a feeling that they might more or less do the same thing, because you can tell in the trailers, oh, they go into another animated world. Okay, fine. And I get it. Listen, it's hard to top live action characters going into an animated world. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, in the first Mary Poppins movie, after that sequence, nothing else really quite lived up to it.
I don't think so.
It stole the show. I mean, the chimney sweeps were fine, but they weren't as good as the animated sequence, right?
There weren't penguins.
Yeah, it wasn't as memorable. So I get that you'd feel obliged. You gotta have animation again. Sure, all right, whatever. But it could have been something very different in an animated world. And then there could have been other things going on. But I should have known from the trailer that they were just going to try to remake the same fucking movie. And listen, I get it. It's probably a big enough risk trying to make a sequel to a movie that's that old. They're like, okay, that's all we want to do in terms of risk-taking. We'll just make it basically the same movie now. And it's just a shame, because I feel like there's a lot of potential for a magical nanny that just can whisk kids away, or anyone really, not even just kids, but just whisk people away into any kind of scenario. There's something so fun about that.
Yeah.
And yet, we just kind of have the same stuff repeated. Listen, they tried to make it a little bit different. Like, all right, instead of going into a chalk drawing, we're going to go into a ceramic bowl that has artwork on it. Yeah. And instead of going to a racetrack, we're going to go to a music hall. Yeah. And instead of going to a wacky laughing uncle that's floating, we're going to go to a wacky upside down aunt who laughs a little bit, maybe.
Okay.
Oh, and her thing isn't laughing, it's she's foreign. So
What?
Yeah, she just has an accent or whatever.
Oh.
Then instead of chimney sweeps, what about lamplighters? Yeah.
That doesn't sound very exciting.
And then instead of flying kites, what about having balloons? Listen, balloons are pretty dope, I'm not going to lie. That was probably an improvement.
Okay.
But still, I didn't want it. I don't want to see the same thing, but a little bit different. Because we already have it.
Yeah.
I can't, like, for some people, that's fine. They just want to remember Mary Poppins. But I've seen Mary Poppins. I don't need to remember. Just give me something new. Now, the musical numbers were, at least, you didn't hear them and think, oh, this is just so similar to the music that was in the other movie. They did try. It was definitely the same style, but they weren't copying the chords or melodies or anything like that.
That's something.
Yes, there's something respectable about that. I'm not sure any of the songs quite live up to what was in the original. I recognize Time Will Tell, but I've listened to the soundtrack a couple times just to kind of get a sense of what's going to be memorable, and I just feel like it's all good music, but I don't think it has the same kind of staying power. And one thing about this that bothered me is the way that Mary Poppins would sing. A lot of it was just she'd talk her lines instead of singing them.
Oh.
And that was just the interpretation that Emily Blunt had for this character, which was pretty good, but just not the same as Julie Andrews.
Yeah.
Because, listen, Julie Andrews was great, and I realize it's difficult to fill her shoes. I think it's entirely possible, and I thought Emily Blunt could have done it. But she tried to go for a slightly different version of the character.
Which is weird, because if it's a sequel, then shouldn't she be similar?
Yes, that's what I think.
Yeah.
But whatever, I wasn't the one that made the decision. Apparently she tried to make Mary Poppins more like the book version.
Okay.
And I'm like, but you're in the movie sequel.
Yeah, the first version didn't bother with that, really? So
yeah.
What the hell?
I think ultimately it really boils down to demeanor. And listen, there's a lot that you can do in terms of a performance, in terms of acting, but there's not a lot you can do in terms of your face.
Right.
Emily Blunt has just a more intimidating face than Julie Andrews did. Now that really works for something like Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Where Emily Blunt thrived. And Julie Andrews at the same age, would probably not do quite as well in a role like that. It is hard to even fathom that. But Julie Andrews, I think what made Mary Poppins especially memorable is that Mary Poppins is a strict, no-nonsense character who's able to have a little fun. But Julie Andrews has this more inviting, pleasant face, I guess you can say. And so you just really feel the kindness and warmth behind her being strict. Where it feels a little more real with Emily Blunt, just because she has that intensity to her naturally. So I just think there's that inherent problem. I mean, it was still a very good interpretation of Mary Poppins, just it was inferior. Probably any performance was going to be inferior, probably.
Unless it was Daniel Day-Lewis.
Now that's interesting.
Just a spoonful of sugar.
One other thing that was inferior was, all right, you have Bert in the first movie, played by Dick Van Dyke.
Right.
Now, Bert was joining along on these adventures, but he kind of felt like he earned it, because he seemed like a very unique kind of guy. Yeah. Not only did he just straight up talk to you, which made him more unique than anyone else that was on the street. He was actually just addressing the audience. But he had a lot of odd jobs, and so he just felt very different from everyone else. Where in this movie, the stand-in for Bert is a guy named Jack, and he's a candle lighter, or a lamp lighter, and that's about it. He doesn't talk to the audience. He doesn't have a bunch of other odd jobs. And so, yeah, being a lamplighter is unique enough, but there are other lamplighters, too. And you could argue, well, in the first movie, there are a lot of other chimney sweeps. Yeah, but that wasn't the only thing that Bert did. He only joined the chimney sweeps when he decided, I'm a chimney sweep right now. So, I guess what I'm saying is, it felt like Bert earned being able to join on these magical adventures because he seems like a unique enough person himself. Jack just doesn't seem that unique. And so, you see him on these adventures, and okay, you're doing fine, but I really don't feel like you should be there right now. like maybe just go away. We don't need you. And we didn't need him.
Oh, poor Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah, they had one tiny portion of a song where he was kind of able to show off his rap skills. It was, just fast talk. It didn't feel like rap. It was very impressive the way they were able to make it totally fit the style of a Mary Poppins song while technically being rap.
Yeah.
So that was cool. Listen, you definitely had a lot of creative people working on this and doing their best. And you can tell there was a lot of effort and love put into this. It's just, ultimately, there was the limitation of, it's got to basically be the first movie, okay? So they did their very best, and I don't know, it was okay. I just felt like it shined the most when it was doing something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like, there was an action sequence at the end where they're trying to literally turn back time by 5 minutes by climbing up Big Ben and just turning the minute hand back. And it's so illogical that it's wonderful. It totally fits the spirit of Mary Poppins. And at first I'm seeing the sequence play out and I'm going, well, this is all wrong. This isn't what Mary Poppins is like. She shouldn't be in an action sequence. But then I stopped myself and went, no, this is good. I get to see Mary Poppins in a totally different thing that I haven't seen her in before. Cool. And so I liked that. And then there was something that they did with the dad character this time around, where we have another strict dad, but in the first movie, the dad is strict and that's about it. In this movie, you can tell that this dad doesn't want to be strict and doesn't want to be mean to his kids, but he's stressed out. And specifically, he's dealing with the death of his wife. That she's been dead for a little while now, but he is still upset about it. He's still mourning. And there's one scene in the first Mary Poppins where the dad is really laying into the kids. You have a scene like that in this movie, but it's a lot more powerful in this movie because basically in the process of yelling at his kids, he just breaks down crying because he misses his wife. And it's just, it's so devastating.
Wow.
And I liked it because it was different. But it also kind of didn't work. And here's why. Because once again, this is a story about the dad needs to learn how to have fun. Yeah. Now, in the first movie, even though they kind of fucked it up a little bit, you got that the dad was strict, and you definitely felt the transformation into when he was having fun. there's a lot less distance to go in this movie because you can just tell by him breaking down that he has like an emotional side. He's not just this hardened person.
Yeah.
And so it just feels a little easier to get him to that spot of, oh, I can have fun. So I don't know. I don't feel that it works as well. I mean, it's definitely still a journey getting from I'm really depressed to, yay, I'm having fun with balloons. But I don't know. That was another thing with the balloon sequence is that, yeah, it's one thing where people are all flying a kite. Wow, fun. But in this one, the balloons would literally, you'd grab the string and pull you up into the air, and then you'd be floating in the sky. And then everyone wound up doing it. And I don't know, I always thought the magic in Mary Poppins was more or less reserved to the people Mary Poppins chose to participate in the magic, but now everyone in town was with these balloons. And they kind of framed it as, oh, these people will forget that this ever happened because they'll stop believing in the magic of childhood. And he had Jack tie a balloon to his bike going, I won't forget Mary Poppins. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm just like, I get what you're going for, but I don't know. It was a wonderful sequence. Just the visuals of seeing all these people in the air holding onto balloons was really, I admit, it was very memorable and fun. And I mean, sure, I guess that's a little different, showing that these outside people can experience the magic of Mary Poppins, but they kind of just shoehorned it. Oh, they're going to forget because of childhood or something. I'm like, well, that's a little depressing, isn't it? Like, they're all just experiencing the wonder of childhood and they're just going to forget? I don't know. I guess there's something to it. I don't want to knock it too hard because I feel like they were going for something pretty impressive. And the lady that was passing out balloons was clearly supposed to be played by Julie Andrews. Well, not too clearly, but Dick Van Dyke showed up earlier playing an old guy, which is a little weird because he played an old guy like 50 years ago when he wasn't that old.
Yeah.
And now he actually is that old.
Right.
And he basically just looks like that old guy looked like, but is a different character because this takes place like 20 or 30 years from the first Mary Poppins or something.
Right.
So it's a little weird. And also, he just comes out of nowhere because basically at the time the scene is taking place where he makes his cameo, it's midnight. So all these characters are in this building, and clearly it's way past closing hours, but these characters are here specifically for the situation that's going on that involves these characters. And then Dick Van Dyke just kind of bursts out of the office like, hello, I'm also here. And I'm like, why? Like, what were you doing here? And that's the first time we see him, so we don't know anything about him, and we never learn why he was there.
Oh, all right.
He gets a little song, and it's about, hey, just because you're old doesn't mean you can't fucking dance. Yeehaw! And he does a dance, and there's energy in it, but you can tell he's 93. And while there's something a little depressing about it, there is also something very uplifting that he's there and dancing.
Yeah, that's something.
And that's fine. I don't feel like Dick Van Dyke was too distracting because, comparing Dick Van Dyke to Lin-Manuel Miranda's character can happen, but I feel like it's not going to happen as much as comparing Emily Blunt to Julie Andrews, comparing the two Mary Poppins. And so if you had Julie Andrews in the movie, I feel like it'd be very easy to be reminded, oh yeah, remember Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins? Isn't it much more interesting than the Emily Blunt version?
Yeah. Like, probably worked out the best in Emily Blunt's favor to not have Julie Andrews there.
Yeah, and I think that's why Julie Andrews declined to take that cameo.
Though she wouldn't say as much, I imagine.
Yeah, she did wind up having a cameo in Aquaman, though.
Oh.
Yes, which beat Mary Poppins Returns at the box office, I believe, so.
All right, well, I mean, if I had to choose between the two to watch, I'd probably pick Aquaman.
Oh my. Well, in our next episode, we'll talk about why that might not be the best decision.
Uh-oh.
But for now, that is actually going to be it for our December movies. We are going to have to do this in 2 parts. But
2 parts again? Wait, no. Well, at least November.
That would wind up being 3 parts.
Yeah, okay, so...
We'll definitely be able to get this done in 2.
Phew, okay.
It'll be fine.
All right.
But Mary Poppins Returns was practically inferior in every way. I just wanted to make sure I got in that line. But
okay. Yep, you got it. I got it.
It was nice to see a musical, though. I mean, it's always nice to see music. I mean, it's no small foot, but it's good to see music. I feel like this is music a lot of people are going to be listening to. In fact, I actually heard someone listening to it in their car the other day.
Okay.
And listen, I think that there is something to that. Yeah, you know how you can blast music out of your car, right?
Yeah.
And people will inevitably hear it. Well, I think what would be a really good idea is you might be thinking, well, let's blast Blinkity Bloop music out of a car and drive around.
Sure.
And that's one thing, but I had this idea in that moment where it'd just be really interesting if we played our music live from like the bed of a truck. You know what I mean? Like the back cargo area of a truck or something like that.
Like a pickup truck?
Yeah. So basically, people would just see us live in traffic.
Yeah.
And it'd be really cool.
I feel like it's definitely more powerful than just hearing the music. Like seeing the actual musicians there, that's more personal.
Absolutely. And the only thing I did think about is that, going 30, 40 miles an hour will probably be fine. And there won't be any problems with us standing up or anything like that.
Right.
But I would want to make sure that we can take this to highways and places where we go really fast.
Maybe we'd sit in the bed of the truck for that. Like we could sit and then we wouldn't have to worry about flying out the back as much.
I want to make sure people can see us, though, is the thing.
That's true.
So I was thinking, like, if we can just get our hands on handcuffs or something and just kind of like
handcuff ourselves to the truck.
It'd be our ankles.
Oh.
Probably. Like I want our hands to be free, but if we could just handcuff our ankles, I think we'd be fine.
Maybe, but I fear like if we were to hit a bump, instead of just falling off, we'd kind of hang off the side and like dislocate our leg.
No,
something.
I think if we get the handcuffs in the right position, we're gonna be totally fine.
Huh.
I mean, there's not really, if you think about it, there's not that much that can really go wrong when you're playing music in the back of a truck at 60 miles an hour, so...
Yeah, I guess I can see where you're coming from there.
I think it's something worth trying out if you want to. We just have to figure out where we can get handcuffs. But anyway, if you also want to get into music, there's a place where you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shit. Wait. Well, yes. Okay. Fisher Miss Media is a place where you can do music. But specifically, if you want to get into movies, if you want to be a movie maker, Fisher Miss Media is the place for you, definitely.
To take your movie audio.
Yeah, they worked on Mary Poppins Returns.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
The music or the sound?
The audio. And it's something you don't have to look it up. You can take our word for it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So don't look it up.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it.
And yeah, basically, if you loved Mary Poppins Returns and the music in that, then you know the kind of results that Fisher Miss Media can deliver for your big Hollywood movie.
Good stuff.
And also audiobooks and music and podcasts or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just Mary Poppins Returns is Fisher Miss Media.
Uh-huh. Yep.